any way you can get in touch with your unconscious is good, well, with the possible exception of certain kinds of drugs or whatever.
Yeah.
Coleridge wrote, I think, one of the 3 or 4 best poems in English. It's Xanadu, and Kubla Khan, it's called. Mm-hmm. It has 3 spelling mistakes in the first line, but it's that only makes it good for freshman English students. They like that. He has come upon, in the early 19th century, in the Romantic period, way before Freud and others, and Breuer, who really came up with the psychoanalysis idea that Freud glommed onto. Coleridge is talking about the conscious and unconscious mind, and he has this sunny place with the caves of ice underneath, and it's marvelous. And he claims that he was taking laudanum, not smoking opium, taking laudanum, which is a derivative of opium. Mm-hmm. And he went into this opium-like dream, and in the dream he got a kind of travelogue in Technicolor with a voiceover, and the voiceover was reciting this poem. So when he woke up, he rushed to his desk and he started to try to write it down, and according to him, a man from Porlock came on some business or other. He threw the guy down the stairs, slammed the door, ran back to the desk, and it was gone.
Yeah.
So he calls it a fragment of a vision. But if you read the poem, you see it's actually finished. It's all part of that romantic idea that from your deep unconscious, out of my great sorrows I make my little songs, as Lana says, all comes from way down deep. And you try to get out of the way of it. Jack Kerouac used to put a roll of paper in his typewriter, so he didn't have to pause to change pages.
Yeah.
And just type to type to type, right? And wrote like that. And I remember I actually saw this. Truman Capote was being interviewed on the Jack Parr show, and they asked him, "What do you think of the writing of Jack Kerouac?" And he said, "That ain't writing, that's typing."
Yeah. I think that role is
Kerouac wouldn't go back and fiddle with it. His argument was very hippie. It was I'm not the person I was yesterday. Who am I to fiddle with somebody else's work? It would just come out unedited.
Yep,
right?
I hear that one all the time.
The book on Ghosts and Poltergeists, let me give you a bit of practical advice.
Okay.
The last thing in the book is the story of an Englishman way back in the 17th century who wakes up in the middle of the night and there is a ghost there. And he says to the ghost, "What do you want?" And the ghost doesn't reply. And he says, "Well, if you've got nothing to do, I have some sleep to catch up on." And he goes back to sleep. But according to all the experts, if you are confronted by a ghost, you must speak to it, him or her, it, and say, "What do you want?" Because the theory is they're coming back to tell you where treasure is buried, or to confess to a murder, or
right.
They want something done. Like usually it's not something good, so don't do it. But like the ghost in Hamlet, they want something, and they come back to do it. But the ghost in Hamlet, you see, Shakespeare's audience truly believed in this. This is a real ghost.
Yeah.
Because other people have seen it too. And they see it before Hamlet's there.
What about the ghost? Well, take, for instance, the ghost in Macbeth. You could say that was just Macbeth's guilty conscience.
Yes.
The ghost of Banquo.
Well, you see, in Macbeth, if you're doing a modern production of Macbeth, there's the dinner party, and he's helped to murder Banquo. And at the party, at the end of the table, Banquo's ghost is seen. But it's only seen by him.
Right.
So if I were directing that scene, I wouldn't have the actor playing Banquo come on stage. I would just have a sort of light grow at the end of the table, suggesting that this is in the mind of Macbeth only. It's his guilty conscience that makes him see Banquo's body covered with blood at the end of the table. Even Lady Macbeth doesn't see the ghost. She sees that her husband is disturbed, and she's afraid that he's going to blab something. She's like some of the president's wives of recent history, a lot smarter than the president, and she's just going to protect him against ruining his career. So she says, "Oh, he's not feeling well, go home, the party's over, get out," But she doesn't see that. Her own guilty conscience starts her sleepwalking and wringing her hands and trying to wash imaginary blood off them. You know, the big sleepwalking scene of Lady Macbeth. The witches, though, are supposed to be real.
Right.
And the play was written to be performed before King James, who was before he was James I of England, he was James VI of Scotland. And when he was James VI of Scotland, he actually presided over witchcraft trials and so on. He was a great believer in witchcraft. And when somebody called Reginald Scott wrote a book saying that these are just deluded old ladies, they're senile, these things are not happening, they're not riding on brooms for the Sabbath and all that. Mm-hmm. He had the book burned, and if he'd been able to get a hold of Scott, he would have burned him too. James was a great believer in witchcraft. What convinced him, by the way, is that a witch told him at one of the trials the sentence that he had spoken to his wife on his wedding night.
Well, that would do it.
I think I know what the sentence was, since he was gay. But she whispered in his ear at the trial what that was, and he thought, well, no one could have possibly have known that. You know,
right?
That one of the few times in his life, being a king, that he was actually alone with just one other person in the bedchamber, with guards outside and all that. But what they were whispering to each other, no one would have been able. And in those days, they didn't bug the rooms the way they do now.
Oh, his wife must have talked to somebody, though.
Well, yes, we always try to find a way around it, don't we? Yeah. Some people will believe in ghosts no matter how much you tell them, give them evidence that it couldn't be so, and other people will desperately try to get rid of this idea and say, oh, well, I know how they did that. I know how they did that trick with the medium. Right? Once in a while, they're up against something difficult. There was a guy called Home, in the 19th century, who, in the presence of a number of other distinguished people, levitated, just flew up off the floor and around the room and kind of thing, you know. There's a guy called Joseph of Cupertino who did that in front of the Pope, a special demonstration and so on. Whether this is mass hysteria or whether he was able to levitate, I don't know. Levitation is a big thing. It doesn't seem to accomplish much, but it's very impressive. Well, yeah. And when St. Francis Xavier was saying Mass, they had to hold him down by his chasuble, or he would just leave the ground. People like to say that people can levitate. Swamis are supposed to be able to levitate. But do we really have these powers? I do think we have abilities to perceive things that we don't use all the time. I know people who read the tarot cards, and they are so good at the speech that is silent, the body language of people, that they can seem to be reading your mind, right? I used to have a friend here in New York who was extremely good at it. He was very devious, too, and he would say, Ghosty, next week you are going to meet somebody. No, last week you met somebody dark. And you say, no, she was a blonde. And he says, oh, I mean dark in character. He was able to send people away from the table absolutely convinced that he was telling their fortunes, you know.
I knew I shouldn't have trusted that blonde woman, yeah.
Well, next week you will. You know, it all depends on where Venus is at the moment in the sky. Nobody's ever explained to me, but people truly believe that. After they look at the headline on the sports scores, they're right there at the horoscopes, right? More people believe in horoscopes than believe in God in America, I think.
Oh, probably, sure.
But I can't understand. I know that the planets have something to do with us. You talk to any woman, she'll tell you that the phases of the moon are very physically important to her. But And when you're born in the winter, your early life is different from when you're born in the summer and all that kind of stuff. But why the way the planets are today means that I shouldn't send my mother-in-law a letter until next Wednesday. I don't see how they come upon that. People are always announcing to me, Paris is Virgo. I say, how do you know? With all this occult business, I always suggest that people simply ask, how do you know? How do you know that this card in the tarot means that? How do you know that this ghost actually appeared? How do you know that if we could really see the future, it wouldn't do us any good anyway, right? Because it's all fixed. If it can be seen coming, then it's there, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So there's no use saying, I see the future and that plane is going to crash, because you're going to be on it, right?
Yeah.
If you're fated to be on that plane and it crashes, then you can't escape it.
Yeah, no matter what, you're going to wind up on that plane.
Yeah, there's a famous story. Somerset Maugham retells it in one of his short stories about a guy who death is coming for him, and he runs away from town and he runs to another place, and he meets somebody in the street, and the person is very shocked to see him, and because it's death, and the death has an appointment with him somewhere else.
You know, that reminds me of that old radio story, the hitchhiker.
We love the idea of the supernatural. Occult simply means hidden, and we're curious. George Carlin says he's curious George, you know. Yeah. We're all curious. We would love to know what happens next, but the main questions are settled. You're going to die, right? So don't worry about it. With when is only a matter of detail, right?
Yep.
And I guess you should take the advice of St. Ignatius Loyola. You know, you should. He was playing tennis, and somebody thought that was frivolous and said, "What would you be doing if you knew you were going to die in half an hour?" And he said, "I would finish the game." You have to be ready to go, and you have to be living in the now, and you have to be doing the right thing all the time. You can't, like my grandmother started reading the Bible when she got to be very old. I accused her of cramming for her finals.
Right.
You know?
Let me give out some information about your books and where people can visit you.
It's called The Complete Book of Ghosts and Poltergeists. My name is Leonard Ashley, and it's published by Barricade Books, and they're in New Jersey. Just try Barricade on the Internet. The Internet puts you in touch with everything, if not the dead, at least everybody alive. And by the way, speaking of being in touch with the dead, think of Shakespeare. He isn't dead in a sense, right?
Well, that's true.
We do continue. We make an impression on the people we meet in our lives, for better or for worse. And as long as we're remembered after we're gone, we're still here.
Yep, that's the secret of immortality. Just influence other people, and you live on.
That's it.
That's it. All right, thank you, Professor Ashley.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you, or at you. I've been really babbling. I hope I said something interesting.